Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Watson Michael from Ceylon Institute of English and Leadership. And once again, we have Corey Glickman back with us. So he's an award-winning author, top influential designer, innovation catalyst, and global thought leadership contributor. So he's the founder and principal of Greenman Black and the co-founder partner of EcoStar. So his career is marked by consistent dedication to collaboration, counsel, and forging strategic partnerships with government, public, private entities, and academic institutions as well. As a renowned industry thought leader, he has been honored as one of the top 100 influential designers of the decade and co-authored the best-selling award-winning book, Practical Sustainability, Circular Economy, Smarter Spaces, and Happier Humans. Corey, welcome back. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Watson. Doing very well, Watson. It's great to be back. Thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to today's conversation.
Yeah, it's an absolute honor to have you back. Great. So, Corey, so we got a very interesting, we got some interesting things to speak about today, right? So, about greenwashing and everything. So, before that, let's start off with a bit of a unique thing which is happening in SF or San Francisco, right? So, there are these automated taxis, right? So, first time I heard about it. What are your views on it?
So it's really interesting. It's something that we were talking about on the side through here, and it's exciting. I don't think it's something was unexpected, but generally it's the idea that we would eventually start seeing self-driving vehicles, autonomous vehicles, that would go into commercial use, with, in this case, taxis, right, as part of a smart city plan. And I think that is exciting. I also think it's worth talking about because we're
Yeah.
going to talk also about greenwashing, and we're going to talk
Mm,
about the challenge for technologies and policies to go across. And I think actually that's a great example that we can
mm,
elaborate and tie things together. Um, as you know from our past discussions, I do quite a bit of work in smart city infrastructure, right? And
mm,
both at the policy level and technology implementation. And having, I'd say, grown up around autonomous type of things, as other people probably may not know, I'm from Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh
yeah.
is a place where Uber is headquartered and Aurora. So I've seen a lot of autonomous vehicles, and we see these every day on our streets. And it's also a center for robotics. So the technology is pretty familiar. It's been around about 10 years. But having San Francisco, and actually there's a few other cities, Austin and a place in Phoenix that's also doing these taxis, start to do a little bit of
Okay.
research into this. And where I would start out with is, if we think about it, smart cities, with their focus on this data-driven decision-making and sustainable practices. They look at transportation, they look at how people live, some are more
Mm,
industrial. How's food security going to take care of us there? They have both a large amount of sustainability challenges, and they're also, I'd say, these super labs, right? Because
mm,
they take on many aspects of society and many needs. So you learn a lot. And they leverage innovative technologies, and they also leverage technologies that are practical. So whether it's now artificial intelligence, IoT, big data, it's about improving
yeah.
infrastructure, it's
Yeah.
about public
Mm,
utilities, the services, and it's all factoring ways to make day-to-day living, cleaner and greener. However, the implementation of those technologies, that could also involve environmental costs, and it could have some
mm,
ethical, issues around that. So
yeah.
if we think about taxis, for instance,
Mm,
um, as I was saying, you talk about San Francisco, both Phoenix and Austin, they've also introduced these taxi services right now. So these
right.
autonomous vehicles, they could potentially reduce emissions, and they could improve transportation efficiency.
Mm,
However, the actual environmental impact, it would depend on various factors, including the source of electricity they use to power these vehicles, and also the efficiency of the operations themselves, right?
yeah.
So that has to be calculated into the equation there. Um, and it is also interesting, if we think about let's say who's the father of autonomous vehicles, let's just say it's Elon Musk and Tesla, for all practical reasons, there's a shift going on, as we know in the news, right? So recently, the Motley Fool had just published an article, I think, just a couple of weeks ago, talking about the fact that Tesla is, they're famous for their vehicles and this whole idea of driving this whole wave of EV vehicles, but now it's predicting that 67%, 70% of their revenues are going to be now AI and not the vehicles themselves. So it's the autonomous AI component of the vehicle or other systems of where they'll be making their profits. And this shift kind of underscores that whole idea of the importance of technology innovation and how it interacts with sustainability. So what happens when these companies and technologies say, well, the data and the software and the autonomous component is where they make their money, is where they'll put the investments to go across there. It's not the hardware side. And so will there be a slowdown in the hard climate technologies and how much, it's where's the money's made and where the focus will be. So there's a lot of things that have to be figured out coming across there. So when you look at cities and you look at things like taxi programs, great ideas, the technology is available, but the business still has to be figured out, right? And of where the money can be made, how the jobs of the VC works across there. So I guess I would say that while greenwashing poses a significant challenge, because truly, is it working? Are things truly being accounted for? The potential of things like smart cities and transportation is immense. It could really be the game changer. However, it's really crucial to ensure that these initiatives are genuinely sustainable and they're beneficial for all. It's not good if it's just for part of the society. Who can afford the driverless taxis is my first question. Who are they meant for? Will they go to all neighborhoods? Everything that you have to question. And that's going to require careful planning. It's going to have real stringent regulations. There has to be a transparency of reporting of the environmental impacts that are taking place. And it's time to, face that, the failure of greenwashing and the strive for authentic sustainability in our cities has to be addressed. So yes, you have to have those technologies, but there's a lot of other factors that you have to have good common sense about. Does that make sense?
Very true. Very true. Yeah, it does make sense. Great. Now we'll get you another interesting part. Okay, so this refers to the article, okay, on LinkedIn. Greenwashing is the Kobayashi Maru of sustainability. Is it time to face the failure, right? So now, based on this, what are the pitfalls of going too big?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, just so everybody knows what the Kobayashi Maru is, right? It's not the secret code word. So anybody that's ever watched a Star Trek movie, right, would know what this is. And basically, it's a test that they would give all of the future Starfleet captains in the future to say, if you're in a no-win situation, you have to sometimes admit you're in a no-win situation. So how do you think through this? And it's this test that's science fiction, but science fiction eventually leads to science, and it doesn't make it a non-real issue. So when I wrote this post in this article, it was just saying, is sustainability and the ability for companies to actually be profitable at it actually a Kobayashi Maru test, right? Can you actually do this? So when we talk about going too big, so I would say when it comes to environmental plans, aiming too high can lead to failure. So for example, as the World Economic Forum stated, by 2030, we must protect twice as much land and 4 times as much of the ocean just to secure this essential ecosystems and avoid the most catastrophic effects that we're all thinking are going to happen with climate change. However, in reality, if the goals are too lofty and expensive, they may be ignored in favor for other opportunities. They just might be too overwhelming and too big to get our heads around, or to say the companies or the academic institutions or governments that can actually affect this, just say it's too big of a problem and there's other things that have to be solved that are easier to understand the economics behind it. So we think about this and we say, so if if that's the case, if things are too big for this to come across here, we have to think about environmental consultants. When they're involved, their contracts need to be substantial enough in order to make a profit without having to build something new every time. It's very difficult, right, to do things.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they become this risk of greenwashing, where it's easier opportunities they're set aside, and clients are appeased with false claims of sustainability. I think I'm an optimist, and I believe that everybody does as best they can. All right. And I believe that, companies ultimately say it's about productivity, profit for shareholders, great career paths for the people who come to work for them, and so forth. And if there is, the desire, of course, everybody realizes the importance of sustainability, but the reality is if they can't stay in business, it's very difficult, right, to fulfill those to shareholders, right? So one of the tenets that I talk about often is, if sustainability can't be profitable for those who are receiving it and those who are delivering it, it's very difficult for itself to be sustainable. And therefore, greenwashing comes into effect, right? We say we do something, we will buy credits versus actually taking carbon out of systems and so forth. So it becomes a bit of a challenge. So sometimes things are too large. And we say, if it's only large, it's only worth doing. And then sometimes we don't do it. And I think that's what happens across there. So I guess my concluding thoughts on this is that while greenwashing is a significant hurdle, it's not insurmountable. It's crucial for companies to set realistic achievement for their environmental goals, and for consultants to maintain integrity and transparency in their practices. By doing so, we can work towards a more sustainable future where greenwashing is the exception, not the norm, through there. And I think we see plenty of models out there like that, but unfortunately, we see a lot of other models in the other direction also, right?
Yeah. So, looking at this, what makes the green initiative an unwinnable scenario?
Well, what makes a green initiative can certainly seem like an unwinnable scenario, particularly when the goals are set too ambitious, they're too lofty, or they're too expensive, right? You hear a lot of the common themes here. So COP28 directive, for example, right, that we just came out of, signaled the beginning of the end of the fossil fuel era, right? That's what the goal was, and that's what people came out with. However, okay, eyes wide open, everybody knows this. It's important to note that the directive was underpinned by deep emission cuts and scaled up finance. And it's a significant step towards, a more sustainable future. However, the involvement of the fossil fuel industry could raise concerns about potential greenwashing. So it's held in the center of the world of fossil fuels, and the president of this is one of the leading benefactors of fossil fuels. So you have to question what does that mean, right? Who's setting the time? Who's taking the advantage of this? So is it an unwinnable scenario if that's what's going, of who's setting the pace and who's ultimately driving this across here? It makes it for an interesting thing. I think, another way to look at it, in addition, is, if we think about the Paris Accords, that were set set for 2050. So the aim is to limit the increase of the global average temperature. Remember, it was 1.5 was right? They changed it now to 2, because at least we're realizing we're not going to hit 1.5. We're already down a path where it's not achievable. So it is actually better to realign to say, well, if we're going to have 2 degrees, change, let's at least adapt for that and address that situation, which is much more realistic, and have solutions that address that. And the statement that I've made in my book, and I make it publicly whenever I can, is my research, and that has been, validated, and this is what we talked about in our last discussion, says that 50% of these goals are obtainable in 5 years of what people are trying to do and companies are trying to do. And you can actually have that return on investment in 1 to 3 years. It's a really bold statement, right? People will go, wow, crazy, right?
Yeah.
So who said it most lately? McKinsey. McKinsey came out with a report that, late last year, saying
Yeah.
basically the same thing. And what they're confirming is that if you align these portfolios with climate goals, with a new approach for financial institutions, suddenly you can get that capital in there. And they emphasize that the technical supports are being designed in ways now to engage counterparties to facilitate this transition. So that basically means the private equity and the large financial institutions and technology with the small and medium enterprise companies that can do the hard climate tech, making the capital available at that level actually can do this because you don't have to invent a lot of things. I'll give you like a concluding statement that we can go further into.
Sure.
So it might seem like it's an unwinnable, scenario again, but it's not impossible. It's about setting realistic goals. It's about making strategic investments at the right level. It's about maintaining that transparency and integrity of our practices. And those are the key factors. It's nothing new of how we do business or how we do technology or how we do policy, but we don't apply those well enough yet, right? And when it comes to sustainability, and that's why it is achievable through there.
Wow. So, I mean, the most interesting part is when you said about the 50%, right? I mean, you can bring it down by 50%. That's within 5 years. That's pretty impressive, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Would you like some examples?
Yeah.
More than happy to
Yeah,
to do that.
sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so one of the ones obviously that I'm familiar with is around the built infrastructure components. Do quite a bit of work in those areas, and so sustainable infrastructure systems, those that are planned and they're designed and they're built and they're operated and things that are decommissioned in a way that assures both the economic and financial and the social environmental. This idea of including climate resilience as part of the design plan. If we can make that institutional, sustainability across a whole infrastructure life cycle. For example, the strategy in a built area must be able to achieve full energy independence, that be energy positive through there. And one example could be the idea that is already out there as the technology, and that's bladeless wind turbines. I don't know if you've seen these or not, right?
Yeah.
So why they're so interesting is they don't harm birds, right? Often people will say birds can be disrupted, by large windmill, traditional ones. They also only occupy 1/10 of the space on a flat roof. So they have less of a footprint through there. And they can be easily installed, and they're 50% more productive than solar panels.
Wow.
Okay, so there's an example of, yes, it's existing technology that has all of these benefits, easy to manufacture, less of a footprint, and they're 50% more productive than a solar panel. So it's already out there. That would be one example. That's a technology example. Let's talk about the other side of the equation. We'll call green human resource management is the term that says practices that have a significant positive influence on employees and on society, on innovation, as well as on environmental performance in societies. So, for example, is a method of culture change, can lead to a significant environmental impact. If a company sets a goal, it supports it, it tracks it, it can result in significant reduction of a carbon footprint, right? So, for instance, the idea of increasing the number of employees who ride a bike to work, something which is very dominant in some countries and then not in other countries. So I'll give you some numbers here, because often we talk about bikes and we see these. It's pretty significant what those steps will take. So the carbon footprint of cycling 1 kilometer is usually in the range of 16 to 50 grams of carbon CO2, per kilometer. It depends on how efficient you cycle, but that's the average coming across there. If you were to compare it to a private vehicle actually is just under a pound of carbon. So it's almost, there's a huge difference across there. And buses, which is somewhere in between, is about half a pound. So buses are better than cars, but bikes are a lot better than buses coming across there. So if you could promote a culture of those that can bike, to locations
Yeah.
versus these other means is a change, in how you can start achieving that 50%. No new technology is involved, right? That's
Yeah.
not even talking about
Yeah.
EV vehicles. That's just regular vehicles
Exactly.
and regular bikes and regular buses. You get even greater benefits when you use alternative things. Um, so the conclusion there is that if we can do this, this built infrastructure and the employee adoption, it can present significant opportunities for achieving those goals. It's about setting those realistic targets, tracking the progress, and companies can make a substantial contribution to reducing their carbon footprint and promoting sustainability. And there's many
Absolutely.
examples like that, but that one I think everybody can get their head around.
Absolutely. Right. So, I mean, like, very insightful, Corey. Pretty insightful. Okay. Right. So, how do you recommend a business relook at their environmental plan?
Sure. So if you think about businesses relooking at their environmental plans, I think it's first crucial to understand that sustainability is not just a moral imperative, but it's also a financial one. That's what business is also, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
about having a positive return on investment and sustainability going hand in hand. And as many sustainable business practices save money or create competitive advantage, it'll open new markets and attract customers and employees through here. So I think there's
Yeah.
certain steps, that can be followed that we've seen. One is, how do you properly identify the problem statements? You have to understand the environmental impact of your business, the operations, identify the areas where improvements can be made. Number two would
Mm.
be focus on the scope and localization. Consider the local
Yes.
context, right? And tailor your environmental plan accordingly. Three, you could apply existing solutions, leverage proven technologies, reduce the risk, and use strategies to reduce your environmental footprint. There's
Yeah.
many things that you could be doing right now. Four, look for that hidden green potential. Explore opportunities for green growth and sustainability within your business. This could involve transitioning to renewable energy sources. It could be
Mm.
improving energy efficiency, developing new products or services that contribute to sustainability and down the supply chain. And then number five, proof it against the return on investment. Measure the success of your sustainability initiatives in terms of return on sustainability investment. The term is actually ROSI. You have to have all these acronyms for everything now, but there's
Yeah.
technically a term in your things to go with now. And evaluate,
ROSI.
yeah,
Uh, ROSI.
ROSI, yeah. So
Yeah.
that is
What?
return on
Yeah.
sustainability investment.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that evaluates the gains that are produced as a result of corporate sustainability initiatives, relative to
Mm.
the amount of money invested in those initiatives, right? So it's a true accountable way of coming across there. So if I were to sum this part up, I would say, you know, while greenwashing poses this significant challenge, it's not the end of the road for sustainability. By companies relooking at their environmental plans and focusing on genuine, impactful actions, businesses can not only contribute to a more sustainable future, but they can also realize significant financial benefits. The key is to approach sustainability not as a cost, but as an investment, and as a return on investment. And it's what's going to
Mm.
build the green economy.
Absolutely. Now, based on this, Corey, what do you mean by localization?
Sure. Localization is so very important. It's much of the work that I do works at both at a policy level and also at an implementation level. And of course, one of the strongest ideas and methods is to say, if something is working in one place, can we lift it and take it
Yeah.
to another place? Yes, you
Yeah.
can, but it always has to be localized, right? Because
Mm.
every place is slightly different, whether it's how the government works or the environment itself or the economics or the culture. So parts can be lifted, but things have to be localized for it to work. So localization in context of sustainability, it really refers to the process of adopting global sustainability goals into local context, making that much more relevant, urgent, and meaningful, right, for where it
Mm.
has to take
Yeah.
place. So that involves
Yeah.
tailoring sustainability initiatives to specific needs, to specific challenges, opportunities of a particular geographical area. This approach recognizes that environmental issues and solutions can vary greatly from one region to another. So let me give you an example of this.
Yeah, sure.
An easy one to picture in your head is a coastal city, for example. They might focus
Okay.
on
I love
sea level
coastal places.
rise, right? And, storm surge protection. While a city in a drought area might focus on water conservation. They're
Hmm.
both dealing with water, but it's totally different because of geography, right?
Yeah.
And how to deal with too much water, too little water, what's changing on
Hmm.
here. So that's an idea of contextualization. You probably will end up using similar water technologies or policies, but they have to be contextualized to those two different regions across there. But the science behind water and understanding how it impacts the environment is probably the same root, source for this. And chances are that both the technology and the individual implementers will probably be
Hmm.
from the same source, but they have to solve it in two different ways, right? So that I think would be an example. So how do you deal with that? You should choose projects that are both completable, they can actually get done,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
completing them is about setting realistic, achievable goals. It's
Hmm.
about breaking down that broad sustainability objectives into specific, manageable projects that can be effectively implemented and completed, right? It's one thing to have ideas, it's another to start a project and, get things in motion, but choose things that can be done. Kind of goes back to what's too big, what's the right size to start. When I work on a city, we'll take a region, right? And we'll do a
Yeah.
specific region and expand out there. If I want to look at an energy corridor that I might be working on, I won't do the
Hmm.
whole corridor. I'll do point A to point B and maybe point C and get those parts right and set up an ecosystem and then figure out how do I grow that because I have to get the economics right. I have to get the right partners in place. We have to deal with governments in conflict. You have to deal with will people actually use what you create, right? So doing
Definitely.
smaller completable systems is a great way of saying, is it doable? Does it actually provide value and work? And can it scale? Both not just, yes, technically you can build anything, but will people actually use it? Will they adopt it? Can it be financed? Can the risk be underwritten? All those things have to be factored in play, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah. And I would say, the other part that you have to think about is, so how do you track and you measure at a localization
Hmm.
level? So the actual impact of these projects, it's crucial for assessing their effectiveness, right? You can install something, but if you're not tracking, measuring it, how do you know if it's actually working and having the desired impact? And then you're going to make the necessary adjustments. The model is going to constantly be tweaked. So that can be done through regular monitoring, reporting, as well as conducting surveys and interviews with stakeholders. A lot of it can be automated, right, through IoT and AI and
Yeah.
components. So it's really cool. So to kind of conclude, what my recommendations would be around this is that localization is a very powerful strategy for enhancing the effectiveness of sustainability initiatives. By tailoring these initiatives to a local context and focusing on those specific completable projects, businesses can really make significant contributions to sustainability overall. Moreover, by tracking and measuring the impact of those projects, you can ensure that those efforts are truly making a difference. And this starts to solve this Kobayashi Maru concept of how
Hmm.
do I start to tackle something that might seem like a no-win scenario and actually start to win that scenario. You change the rules,
Yeah.
up a bit because you can prove that you can do this. And that's why I think localization is extremely, extremely important over and over again.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting, Corey. Yeah. So, any like any final message, Corey, you would like to you to our viewers
Sure.
and listeners?
Yeah, I was expecting that question because we've talked before, and it's always a good question. So yeah,
Yeah.
I would say I would break it into maybe three thoughts, statements here. First about
Sure.
greenwashing, right? So let's acknowledge that greenwashing, it's this practice of making misleading or unsubstantiated claims about environmental benefits of a product, of a service, or a company, is
Mm-hmm.
indeed a significant challenge, around sustainability. We know it happens
Yeah.
there. It not only undermines genuine efforts to reduce emissions and address climate crisis, but it also hampers trust and ambition
Mm.
and the action needed to bring global change. So let's just acknowledge that it happens and it comes through here. And
Yeah.
when we talk about this in this context of, we talk about Kobayashi Maru because we wanted to bring attention to it. It's really this, question I said, does it mean we're going to have failure? I think greenwashing, the practice of misleading claims about the environment and its benefits, it presents it as a no-win scenario because it can create this false sense of progress towards sustainability.
Mm.
But in reality, the fact is that things are doable, that technologies do work, policies are being created. There are many great examples of things that actually work and do make a difference. For instance, the ozone
Mm.
layer is starting to come back significantly.
Oh, good
We're
news.
seeing huge advances in certainly renewable technologies like EV and others
Mm.
components. Just the example of the bladeless, collectors for energy is something that
Mm.
exists. We are seeing cities going net positive. Recently worked on a program in Cairo, where
Okay.
with the University of Mansoura, that within a matter of 4 months, we took a section and made it net energy positive, right?
Wow.
Complete part of that. Didn't do the whole city, but did a section, said this is provable, and did it at a rate that was less than $1 million for the entire project. So that means
Wow.
you can actually deliver real solutions with existing technologies that have that desired outcome. But more importantly, not only was it affordable, which means it's scalable, that the businesses that delivered the work actually made enough money to stay in business and to grow their
Mm.
business. And that's part of it, right? And that net
Yes.
positive wasn't about carbon credit accounting. It was physically changing the energy quotient and making that renewable across there. And being able to do it in neighborhoods where it's just transition. So it's just not for the very wealthy or, the very high tech areas, but this actually can happen across there. So it's very doable. And it was done by the local community in conjunction with
Mm.
governments. So that's, we've seen it work, right? And that's what I
Wow.
think is so exciting and interesting. Mhm.
Wow. Pretty interesting. Right. So yeah. So there you go. Right. So Corey,
Cool.
thank you very much for taking time and doing this podcast with us.
I want to thank you, Watson. It's always a pleasure to get to chat, to share ideas, and I think your show is a great forum for what you do. Have deep, deep respect, and just appreciate the opportunity to have the conversations.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Corey.